so we've derived supply and demand curves, but do they move? Can you move along them? Yeah, you can. Let's start with a demand curve, and then we'll put a supply curve over here. So we have a demand curve, it's downward sloping. It's a visual representation of a demand schedule, which is a table. And we know the law of demand applies, number one, because it's a negative relationship, but as price goes up, quantity decreases. As price goes down, quantity increases. This is just a graph, so I can say, hey, here's a high price. That brings me a low quantity. At a lower price, as prices go down, I buy a higher quantity. Okay, excuse me, quantity low. Obviously this is 0, over here's a lot. Okay, so at a low price, you want a high quantity. At a high price, you want a low quantity. That is just a graphical representation of that relationship. Now, there are two different things you have to keep in mind here with these curves. So, you can have movement along the curve, up and down. Okay, up and down, you can move all the way along the curve. What am I doing if it's movement along the curve? Well, if it's movement along the curve, the only thing that's changing, delta, this triangle, is change. The only thing that's changing is price. Because if you remember, if we had our supply schedule over here, we had price 1, price 2, price 3, we had person 1, person 2, person 3, and we had these numbers in here. The only thing we were doing if we were moving along this curve was moving, say, from here to there. So the only thing changing here was price. Okay? So movement along the curve, if you're staying on the curve and it's not shifting, all right, you're talking movements along the demand curve. Now, shifts in the curve are a little bit different. First of all, when we're talking about shifts, where I'm talking supply or demand, please don't think up or down. Okay? You can get away with it in the demand curve. It's a real problem with the supply curve here in a second. Okay? When you're looking at movement of the curve, I want you to think left and right. Okay? Left is towards 0. Right is towards a lot. All right? So more. All right? Well, if I'm going right, am I going towards 0 or am I going towards a lot? Okay? Well, if I'm going right, that is a demand increase. Okay? If I'm going left, I'm going towards 0, that is a demand decrease. Now, a little tip here on the homework. If we're moving to the left, aren't we moving downward in price? So when you have a demand decrease, there's downward pressure on price. Okay? When you have a demand increase, you shift outward, there is upward pressure on price. You're going to thank me on the homework on that one. So if you're doing the Mind Tap homework, that's in there, talking about pressure. So if you're moving out to the right, there's upward pressure. I feel like the weatherman. If you're moving this way, there's upward pressure on price. If you're moving that way, there's downward pressure on price. So keep that in mind. Now, what makes us move left or right towards 0 or a lot? That's a little more complicated than just a change in price. There's a handful of things that get us to shift the demand curve. It's very simple when you're moving along the demand curve, you're just changing price. All right, so if you're not moving from either line here, you're just moving up and down this curve, that's just a change in price. Okay? It gets a little more complicated when you have shifts of the demand curve. So why might you increase your demand or decrease your demand? Well, again, delta is change, okay? Change in income. All right? If you have a change in income, let's say you graduate from college and you get a great job and you're earning good money, all of a sudden, there are certain things that you demand more of, okay? And if you increase your income, if your income increases and your demand for a good increases, that's called a normal good. That's most goods. All right? If you have a decrease in income and your demand for something decreases, that's what's called an inferior good. All right, good example among college students, and I always have the ones like, oh, I love top ramen noodles. You will stop eating top ramen noodles once you can earn real money and you can afford some good Japanese yakisoba noodles. Okay? Your income decreases and your demand for something decreases. That makes that an inferior good. That's something that you eat less of as you earn more money, and vice versa. If you become more poor, you eat more of it. So changes in income can shift this demand. So let's say, ignore decreases for a second. Let's say you get a better job, boom, hard shift to the right for your your demand of prime steak. Okay, so if you start earning more money, you're going to eat more prime steak, more lobster, that type of thing. If you start earning more money and demand decreases, that's an inferior good. You stop eating as much top ramen noodles. All right, so that's your shifts in demand due to income. Another reason that your demand may shift is you can have a change in related goods. Everybody's like, what is that? Well, that's substitutes. And that's compliments, not, hey, your hair looks nice today. Complimentary items. Example of substitutes is Coke and Pepsi. If Pepsi becomes more expensive, people buy more Coke. It's just simple as that. And compliments, hot dogs and hot dog buns. I mean, what kind of psychopath just goes and buys just hot dog buns? You gotta keep an eye on that person, okay? If you're buying hot dog buns, you're also buying hot dogs. If the price of hot dogs goes through the roof, you're buying less hot dog buns. Does that affect your demand? Do you move along the demand curve, or do you shift your demand curve? If hot dogs become super expensive and you quit buying hot dogs, then you also quit buying the things that go with hot dogs, meaning you're buying less hot dog buns, so they stay on the shelf, and you buy less, so boom, your demand comes inward. Remember, it moves towards zero or a lot. In that situation, it's going to be a decrease moving towards zero. All right. Another reason why demand might shift, change in tastes. I used to hate Brussels sprouts. My mom made me eat them, and I hated them. Now I love them. Put enough balsamic vinaigrette on them, blister them in a hot oven, and they're delicious. My taste have changed. That affected my demand for Brussels sprouts. Change in expectations. Dun, 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 dun. Nightly news comes on and says, hello, Skittles have the same effect as Viagra. You think that's going to help the sales of Skittles? You bet, buddy. People are going to be shifting that old demand curve out. You're going to have a bunch of dirty old men and their walkers trying to go out to get some Skittles, right? Dun, 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 dun. News comes on and says, Skittles will literally kill you, which they probably will. Demand's going to shift inwards. Like, yeah, people will stop eating them altogether. No, they won't. You know how I know that? As an economist, I can observe things. I observe that cigarettes are still sold in bulk these days, and we know they will straight up kill you. So some people are just addicted. So it won't go to zero, but if it does come out that you expect to die now from eating Skittles, demand is going to decrease. And then lastly, a change in the number of buyers. So suddenly, if a bunch of people move into town and they start buying things, that can affect demand to a point that it shifts. Or if a bunch of people, if a mill closes and everybody moves out of town, that can affect demand as well. So if a bunch of people leave a town because the mill closed, there's less demand, there's hard shift to the left, and restaurants are going to struggle, that type of thing. I'm going to shift our talk about movement along the curve and shifts with supply to the next video, so I can keep these things pretty much under 10 minutes. So I hope you're enjoying. Next video will be about movements along the curve and shifts of the supply curve. And then we're going to put those in the video after that. We're going to put those crazy kids together.